In this demonstration, I'll describe the steps involved with modifying a TLSO in the Omega software. We've already scanned our patient, and now we just need to find it within the software program. So we're on the main screen within the Omega software. So we just need to do a search and find the scan. So I'll just go ahead and type in the initials of my patient, narrow the search, and it brings up a screen so that I can find the scan for the patient that I'm looking for. There it is. Click on a left click shape, and now I need to import it into the Omega software. So if I click import and then the eyeglass, and it brings me to a list. Left click, scan twice, and now it's going to ask me to go ahead and orient or align the shape so that I can begin to work on this model. Now, this looks like it's extremely rough at this point, and it's certainly not the best scan that I've ever taken, but we can go ahead and clean this up. The back actually looks pretty good. There's a couple of missing areas, but for the most part, we can definitely work with this scan. And a lot of this artifact is because we pulled a cotton stockinette over our patient during the scanning process. But within this software, we have an edit option. And we're going to go ahead and do some editing here before we go ahead and align this shape. So I'm going to left click edit. We're going to trim off some areas here at the top. We don't need the patient's neck. So we're going to just pull this down, and again by left clicking and holding I can pull this screen down and go ahead and just trim this part off, hit cut, and that'll go away. Then I'm going to left click this eraser. I'm going to make it a little larger to about the size of 1 inch, and by holding it over this area of artifact it'll turn it red. I'm actually going to go up a little bit higher here, see if I can't get some of this to highlight as well, and trim that off as well. I'm going to do the same over here on the right side. This is part of the patient's arm. There we go. Good. So that looks good. Now we are ready to go to the align shape portion. And now we have 3 different views. Again, you can start with any one of these. I'm going to start here on the bottom left hand side, and I'm going to rotate it. You can see it was initially twisted a little bit. And just get it oriented. Keep in mind that when you change one, you're actually affecting each of the 3 of these positions. Now I'm going to change my focus to the center image here, and what I like to do here is think of the navel or the belly button, and I want this vertical axis to run through the navel and then straight up through the proximal center line of the image, if you keep it in that perspective. So I'm just going to tilt this, so this bent line with the circle allows me to tilt from left to right. So with the vertical axis running through the belly button, now I'm just going to tilt it so that it runs right through the center of the proximal portion or superior portion of this model. Alright, now we're going to move our attention to the far right image. With this one, I'm going to start with the tilt, and I'm going to just tilt it anteriorly and then shift it just a little bit from left to right. And then go back to the very first one on the far left and just double check, starting with the left one. Making sure everything is very square. So now this looks like it's aligned pretty well. Very important to save at this point. You'll notice right up at the top here it says saved. So my model is now saved. we can go to the cleanup. Now, we can see on the anterior part of our model that this looks pretty rough. But actually, this is a good scan. We can definitely work with this. Rotate it to the back. Again, some of these wrinkles, this is just the cotton stockinette that we scanned over. So what we're going to do is we can hit this global smart blend, and it'll clean it up a little bit. Hit it a couple of times. But the most effective way to do this is go to the large blend, and then we are going to right click and hold, and you can see how I can blend a lot of this out of here. So we're going to spend a few minutes just going over this model and blending this out. It's no different than taking a shear form to a plaster model and just cleaning up the model, getting rid of any roping that occurs when you take a cast. This is just a lot easier and quicker. So I'm just going to work my way around this model and clean it up, and within a few minutes I'll have this thing looking very nice. And rather than just spend about a couple of minutes on one spot, I like to unclick and then work my way around, kind of smaller areas, and just clean it up. During the scanning process, I like to identify the waste groove with a piece of tape. Basically, it's electrical tape or sometimes clear tape. And that way I know I have my waste groove identified during the scanning process. Do the same thing when I use plaster. So just keep working around. Clean up the bottom, even though a lot of this is outside of the trim lines. Reorient the model. Again, most of the work is just here in the very front, but you can see already this thing is really cleaning up nicely. Through here the pecs. And while you're doing this, it's very helpful to look at the profile just to make sure you don't have any anomalies occurring. I've noticed on this model that the tape actually created an indentation here on the that six-pack area. So we will repair that throughout the modification process. All right, we'll get this here at the very top. All right, so the anterior part of this is starting to look very good. And, continue to work our way around. This is all part of the capture process, preparing our model for the design phase, which is our modification steps. We'll be done here in another minute or two. Again, you have the option of using a larger blend tool. I like this 2-inch blend. All right, So this model has come a long way and is ready for landmarks. All right, so I'm going to go back to anterior, square it up, and we're going to move on to the landmark phase. So we'll click landmarks. We'll let this set up for a second. There's a gold star here. I'm going to left click that. It says TLSO number 6. Click that. And a list of landmarks will pop up. So we'll click ASIS. You'll also notice all of the little dots will appear. These are all the markers that were placed during the scanning process. We can still clearly see the waist groove. When I put the cursor on the model, it is clearly in the waist groove and it's square. So that's a good thing. We don't want our waist groove to be offset or have one side higher than the other. So this is good. Now I'm going to place my left waist groove because we have, or excuse me, ASIS marker, because we have one marking the right side over in our landmark list. So I actually placed markers or reflectors right on the ASIS. Now with the cotton stockinette, they may have moved a little bit. So I want to make sure with my green line that I have these placed squarely. So I'm going to use this green line and double click and place the left ASI marker on the model. Now using that same green line, this one looks pretty accurate. Make sure that they're at the same level. Double click. So I have my right ASI marker here, left ASIS marker there, and they're at the same level. We'll move on to the inferior angle of the scapula. Now with these, I did the same thing. I placed markers or reflectors on the patient. There's two right in the same mark here, or area here, and this is the level, roughly speaking, of the ASI, or excuse me, inferior angle of the scapula. So I'm going to click once and then drag a line to the opposite side. The importance of this marker is this is going to be the trim line or the height of my brace. Move on to the pubis. This is roughly about 4 inches below, in most cases, the waist groove. So I'm going to go centered on my model, roughly 4 inches below. I also placed a marker on my patient, so this, I'm guessing this is going to be about this level and right about where that marker is. Double click, place the pubis marker there. Sternal notch, again about this level. I'm going to leave a line up at this level here. So double click. I'm going to go back to the pubis. Just to make it easier, I'm going to do the same thing down here. If it'll let me. Yeah, it's probably not going to let me at this point. So we'll just leave that one as is and move on to the waist groove. With the waist groove, we want to place our first marker starting at the back so we can clearly see the indentation of the waist groove. And we want to start about 1.5 inches from the back, click once, and then go up at an angle slightly, and this should be arched. I'm going to come off the model, and then I need to figure out where the ASIS is. And then we're going to start to come downward. I'm actually going to back that one up just a little bit. And spin this around to the front so I can see it better. Well, that looks pretty good. All right, then I need to go back to this and double click. And now I have my left waist groove set. So we're going to move on to the right side. Now it's very important that we get these exactly right and level with one another. So again, we're going to come off the back of the model in 1.5 inches. click once, the left mouse, go up slightly, one click, and then we're going to start coming down. And we're going to come off the model, spin it around. We're going to locate our ASIS marker, there it is. And then we're going to come down and we want these to match. Alright, so back to anterior, get our model squared away. Take our green line. Looks pretty close. Alright, so there it is. The all-important waist groove is set. Let's go to xiphoid process. Again, I placed a reflector on the patient's xiphoid process. This is pretty close. Double click, leave our marker there. So all of our landmarks are now placed. This is the capture mode for the Omega software, and we are now ready to go on to the design tab. So this is one way to do this, and we are done. So we're going to move on to the design function and complete our modifications with the Omega software.